Personally, I'm here to be curious.
I'm talking about quantum physics and the scientific revolution.
And pioneering what's next for humanity.
And galactic space exploration.
Oh, so you found them with your bare eyeballs. You didn't find them using your metal detector.
I'm talking about landing rockets.
All that and more on this episode of the New Energy Industry podcast.
The following is an introduction to a new discovery and to the beginning of a scientific revolution. Brought to you by the New Energy Industry.
I'm Josh Vodasek.
And I am Brian Glassett.
Thank you for joining us.
This is an important episode.
It's the beginning of the New Energy Industry's podcast, and it's the first day of the rest of our lives. Welcome to the future.
On this episode, we're going to cover the next 2 years' worth of content in just 30 minutes. We'll want to give you a preview of what's to come as time flies, hurtling rapidly into the future.
This episode is also an introduction to the new energy industry in general. Now, other than a mouthful,
the new energy industry.
The new energy industry.
The new energy industry.
The new energy industry. What's this all about, and why on earth should I remember? That's a good question, ladies and gentlemen, and by golly, do we have some answers for you.
Now, maybe I'll get things started.
Yeah, you go ahead.
The new energy industry, for me, represents a shared path into exploring and pioneering what's next for humanity. Personally, I'm here to be curious. By following that curiosity on the podcast, I hope that my own questions and those of listeners might find answers. And perhaps even more importantly, find even more questions to be asked. My expertise and my research are in the field of consciousness, specifically in the applied art and science of yoga. So, naturally, I'll be coming at all of the topics that we explore on the podcast from that general angle. I know that we'll be traversing through many areas of life as we go forward and discuss what's on the horizon for humanity, and I'm really looking forward to finding out how all of these various parts of life that we discuss fit into the evolving cosmic whole. I believe that maturing the connection between individual and cosmos is central to the global paradigm shift that the new energy industry is all about. As the primary founder and the steward of the project, Josh, I'm eager to hear what the new energy industry is to you.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I really like what you said, maturing the connection between individuals and the cosmos, being central in our global paradigm currently and how it's going to be shifting into the future. And that's really kind of the way I see the new energy industry. For me, this project and this podcast represents the next frontier for humanity on this planet. This involves the current and ongoing scientific revolution, as well as us Earthlings becoming spacefaring civilization, which is seemingly right around the corner. I'm talking about quantum physics and the scientific revolution. I'm talking about landing rockets and galactic space exploration. I'm talking about electric cars, autopilot, artificial intelligence, as well as the next frontier of scientific advancement. That is the new energy industry. As well, the new energy industry is in tribute to the life, work, and legacy of Nikola Tesla. To support this project, we encourage you to visit thenewenergyindustry.com and become a founder by purchasing a Nikola Tesla Tribute Founders Coin. This is a tribute coin similar to a military challenge coin. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, so that's where I got the idea for this coin. But this Nikola Tesla Tribute Coin, it's not a cryptocurrency or anything like that. Rather, this coin serves as a physical keepsake designed to connect you energetically to the global community of people dedicated to change the world for the better. If you're a marketer and you'd like to help promote this project, please email info@thenewenergyindustry.com and ask about our affiliate program. We pay between 7 and 10% on every sale you generate. And I would like to say thank you to all of you current founders who have already decided to support this exciting project. Thank you for your support.
Yeah, thanks a lot, really. Without founders like you, this wouldn't be possible. So let's get back to outer space. This is going to be a recurring theme on the podcast, which you brought up. This idea that we're turning into a spacefaring civilization, right? So today marks the 1-year anniversary for you, Josh, right, of searching and finding 3 meteorites. Is that correct?
Indeed it is. This time last year, a meteorite about the size of a Volkswagen came roaring through the atmosphere, heated up to the point of boloid, and exploded, raining fragments of meteorite debris throughout the state of Michigan.
Spectacular. Wow. how did you find out about it, and what drove you to go looking for pieces of the meteorite?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I actually didn't hear the meteorite. I didn't feel the little earthquake tremor that it created. Now, again, this meteorite didn't actually impact the Earth. It just entered the atmosphere. And in moving so quickly, 40,000 miles an hour through the atmosphere, heated up and exploded. I didn't see it. I didn't feel it. I was sleeping. However, the next morning, my mom calls me bright and early. She's like, I saw on the morning news that a meteorite came through Michigan, and Michigan meteorite. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And that was
Thanks,
that.
Mom.
Yeah, thanks, Mom. Appreciate the news.
So from then, you probably looked up more details about it and got to know that, okay, it wasn't an actual impact, but that it had exploded above the ground, and that perhaps there were tiny fragments that could be found. Is that kind of your thought process that brought you further into this?
Yeah, more or less. Later that same day, my dad actually texted me. He's like, hey, are you going to look for meteorites? They're worth their weight in gold. And I hadn't even considered the idea of actually going and trying to find these little rocks that have been scattered from outer space onto Earth. The probability of finding them are low. I might as well not even consciously consider it. However,
Right.
when my dad texted me, hey, are you going to find them? I thought to myself, if indeed I was, how would I go about trying to find them? And is this something that I could even possibly realistically do?
Great first question.
So then that opened up my natural OCD, and I did a bunch of research online to find the kind of general area in the state of Michigan where it happened. And this was an article that featured several different eyewitness reports, all triangulating a trajectory path of the meteorite.
Fascinating.
So I saw this map, and I saw the eyewitness testimonies and the trajectory map, and I was like, okay, this looks pretty good. The main piece of hypothetical search territory within this trajectory just happens to be this major highway. And I thought to myself, okay, this big major highway would act as like a runway for things to land on and then maybe make their way over to the median. And I also saw on an episode of Meteorite Hunters a while back that along the roadways, it may be a good place to find meteorites after a visible meteor shower because it's public, you can walk along it, and indeed it is like a large kind of runway that things can land on. The odds of it happening are low, but it's better than finding them in a field.
Right.
And this again was in January this time last year, sub 0 degree temperatures with snow. So
Wow.
So I thought to myself, based on this map, the only kind of plausible way of finding them is to walk a few miles along the side of this highway with a high power magnet. And the only way to do it safely is to do it in the most off hours of driving. So, 2 or 3 in the morning with a big spotlight on my head.
So you're out there in the dead of winter, in the middle of the night, with a giant spotlight on your head. And for those of you who don't know, Josh is a tall person, a very tall person.
5'18" to be exact.
You look like something out there.
Well, I was very well prepared. I had many layers on, as far as warming layers. I had nutritional drinks and food. And I had recently run a marathon. So, walking several miles along the road, looking on the ground, is no problem. And if I find a meteorite, that's awesome. So, I was about 7 miles into the walk. I walked about 5 miles down. I was on my way back on the other side when the state trooper picked me up. State trooper pulls alongside me. I turn off my spotlight so I can look at him and have a conversation with him. And I tell him what I'm doing, and he turned out to be very interested. He actually had seen the meteorite explode the night prior.
Wow. So this is an eyewitness that you get to speak with.
He was
directly there.
The police officer who said, I cannot be doing this. I need to leave, was an eyewitness who saw the meteorite the day prior. But in giving me a ride back to my car, he brought up on his little police cop map inside of his car, that little computer, he brought up a map of the surrounding area, and he actually pointed me to the direction of where it actually happened over in a different county, just like the neighboring county, about 15 minutes away. So I was like, oh, this is spectacular. I still got some hours ahead of me. So I drove over to this neighboring county. The main road, this, was a much smaller area. It didn't have a major highway. It was just like a small main street road that ran for several miles through the town. So
much different experience from walking down the side of a major highway.
At 4 in the morning with a spotlight and a old, very large magnet. So I go over to that neighboring county and I walk another several miles along the road at 4 in the morning until 6 in the morning. The sun's coming up, traffic's picking up. I'm like, I found nothing. Disheartened, exhausted, and I still got to get up and do some work in the morning. So I go to sleep, I wake up several hours later, do some work, think about it, and I see this news article of someone who actually found some pieces. There are some astronomers that worked in the observatory up in Flint, Michigan, and they had rallied a team together and they went and searched the area. But the thing is the data they had was NASA data. NASA keeps weather data all the time, and NASA registered the meteorite explosion as rain through the atmosphere.
Okay. So it picked it up as if it would pick up precipitation on a weather radar.
Yeah, like a storm, a momentary storm of rain, like really quickly. So NASA sent this data imagery to the local observatory. Rangers up there all rallied a team. They went out to this county and they were walking around the park, but the park in the area, it had 2 inches of snow, and underneath that was a couple inches of grass. But then someone that they came across randomly in the park said, if you want to go out onto one of those frozen lakes, that might be your best bet to find something. So then this team went out onto the frozen lake that same morning, and actually were able to find 3 meteorites. So that was then reported on in the Michigan newspaper. Michigan meteorites found, very exciting news. And I read this article and I'm like, oh, frozen lake, that's genius. So I rethink to myself, okay, what's the temperature? Sure enough, it's still below freezing. However, the next day it's going to be into the high to mid 40s. And I'm like, oh my God, that's not safe. However, I have a very small window of opportunity while the lakes are still frozen to indeed get out there one more time and give it another go. So my plan this time was I opened up Google Maps and I kind of used my intuition and found a lake and found a road that I felt like I may be able to park on with some easy access to the frozen lake. Sure enough, when I actually got there, it was a little tiny public park with lake access. It turned out to be perfect. And I got there right before sunrise, so it was still dark. But then I was walking out onto the frozen lake right at that early twilight light and before anybody else was even out there. So the light was really gentle and I was able to see really clearly for a long ways out on this frozen lake bed. And I walked for another 5 miles and I found myself 3 meteorites, which you may be able to hear them on the counter.
Amazing.
3 Michigan meteorites I found with my bare eyeballs on a frozen lake bed.
Wow, so you found them with your bare eyeballs. You didn't find them using your metal detector.
Correct. Yeah, I actually was able to spot them. I was on the lake, majority of it is white, snowy, frozen. But then there's a lot of little weird shadows, a couple leaves every once in a while some sticks, but a lot of weird shadows. And just looking, the first time I saw the meteorite, I immediately identified it, just like intuitively. It was pretty far away, but I was like, that shouldn't be out here.
Something in you knew.
Yeah.
There was something that your brain recognized as something out of place in the pattern.
Yeah, because it very much looked like a burnt, charred rock, which is indeed what it was. The meteorite itself, it was this space rock that has all these exotic metals and stuff in it that burnt as it entered the atmosphere, exploded, and then all those little pieces then burnt through the atmosphere. So each one of these 3 meteorites is charred, pretty much black all the way around it, with some chips to where you can actually see the internal contents, and that's pretty fascinating. And I found these meteorites kind of, the odds were against me, but I did it somehow, and I'm kind of dedicating this meteorite find to the new energy industry. And it's incredibly exciting because I love space exploration. I love space science and knowledge and the evolving space technological industries. And now I get to hold a piece in my hand, a piece of rock that was traveling around the solar system for billions and billions of years and flew by the Earth, exploded, and then I went out and picked it up in bare hands. And I'm dedicating this find to the new energy industry. And with that being said, I'd like to transition on into some of the next topics here to cover before we wrap up this podcast.
Well, that's really fascinating. I really appreciate you telling that story. And it's a great story of the triumph of the human spirit. And it's also just fascinating that you are in your hand right now holding bits of outer space.
Bits of outer space, and they are not radioactive, so that's good.
Good. Yeah. My next sort of joking question was going to be, have you developed any superpowers?
Yes, I am a next level field effect engineer, and it's a consciousness superpower.
Awesome.
Anyway, so now now that we covered the meteorite story, I would just like to transition into a bunch of other topics that we were going to cover in the new energy industry going forward for the next couple years. And, the new energy industry, information for a scientific revolution, that all kind of hinges around unified physics and this current scientific revolution in unified physics that we're currently going through. And now that's a really incredibly exciting topic, and unifying gravity with the standard model, if you will, in physics, and coming up with a more evolved, holistic perspective of the universe, and also a scientific and thus technological revolution that is currently underway in laboratories around the world. And that is incredibly exciting, and that is the foundation of the new energy industry, information for a scientific revolution.
Right. That's really what started you off on all of this, is this idea that we are developing, as our experts work in their respective fields of physics, and developing a unified perspective of the universe, a unified perspective of physics that unifies elements that have been disparate for a long time, that have been separated from one another. And I know that Nassim Haramein is one person who is central to this, and there are other people who are working on this as well. You've been one of the people who's been sort of a gatekeeper to this knowledge for me, and has opened me up to exploring some of these topics. And I'm really looking forward to talking more about unified physics with you as we go forward into all this. So physics and the future of physics leads us into kind of a broader topic that I know we'll cover a lot, which we've kind of couched into what we're calling the future and global sustainability. We see that oftentimes actually, technology isn't always developed sustainably.
Yeah.
And that's one of the major things that I'm looking forward to discussing with you is, along with unified physics, along with outer space, how do we bring it home to everyday experience of living, and how do we find our way into the future in a sustainable way, in a global way that allows all life on Earth to thrive.
Yeah, that's really great. Sustainability is a huge, emotional point for me in general. Sustainability is really important to me. It's actually what I got my degree in. My bachelor's degree is in sustainable living, which is a multidisciplinary study covering all sorts of different topics of sustainability. But it's a foundation, kind of the way I see the world is through a sustainability lens, and it's really important to me, and thus it's a foundation of this project.
Awesome. And that kind of brings us to the next topic. We need to develop these sustainable solutions for our world, and science is our greatest ally in that. Sometimes science goes off into the weeds and doesn't develop things sustainably, but science is the engine that's going to bring us forward into the future that we're talking about. And in order to build a future that is sustainable and that is inclusive in its gifts to everyone, we need to understand the history of science. So that's something that I'm also interested in exploring together, the history of how science developed as a way of thinking, and then sort of more of the history of the developments of science, so that we know where we've been and how we should be thinking about things. How do we think in order to call ourselves scientists?
Yeah.
And then how do we take that and move it into the future to develop the science of the future, which is a holistic science. It's a science that is not divorced from the human spirit, but and that's a whole other topic of consciousness that we'll discover along the way, the intersection of science in the past, in the future, in the present, and how humans relate to all that.
Yeah.
And one of the most fun things about being a human is having a good time, right? And I know that you really wanted to incorporate and make sure that we have a really fun time as we're doing this. And I agree. I want to just be in the enjoyment of the process.
Yeah, this podcast, I mean, the goal of it is to have fun and to tell jokes. And with that being said, I would like to tell a joke. It's not really a joke, it's more of a fact that happens to be funny. And it's the fact that SpaceX, under the table, refers to Blue Origin, abbreviation BO, as body odor.
Oh, that is too much.
That's low. That's low. But it's okay because, they poach employees from SpaceX all the time. And, healthy rivalry between competitive entities is never a bad idea. So that's a joke. Hopefully it lightens the mood. Some of the next topics, in addition to, the history of science. The history of science is key in to just get a grounding sense of reality of where we are at, how we got here, and where we could possibly go in the future. And we're really at this exciting precipice of making history every single day. The speed at which technology and knowledge and information is developing, it's exponential and it's exciting. And now with the advent and development of artificial intelligence, it's only going to get more exciting. So it's important to look through the rearview mirror every once in a while, see where we've come from in order to have a better sense of where we can go. And as far as looking through different mirrors and stuff, Brian, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about kind of personal paradigm shifts and how we see the world and the new energy industry.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say that there's a lot that can be done on the personal level in terms of the shift that's happening on the planet. Of course, we're talking about these larger trends of changing technology and the options that gives humanity. But that major kind of global paradigm shift is also mirrored in us. So a paradigm is a worldview. It's a word we're going to be using a lot. And shifting our worldview is something that can be quite challenging.
Yeah.
And it's partially why the world is in the state that it is in now. I mean, we have solutions to many of our problems. Whether or not they can be scaled or not is something to be discussed. Sure. But it's consciousness, it's the personal paradigm of individual thinkers, and then the broader paradigms of groups of thinkers or societies or cultures that is holding us back.
Yeah.
If each of us could shift our personal paradigm and in that way change the choices that we're making to move more toward that sustainable global future that we're talking about, that's where the rubber really hits the road.
Yeah.
Huge advances in technology are big pushers of our advancement as a society, as a civilization, but that personal paradigm shift on the daily action level, but also on the spiritual level of who we know ourselves to be. Are we just drifting on a weird rock in the middle of nothingness, or are we an integral part of the entire whole? The way that we think about ourselves.
I say the latter.
Yeah, I say the latter too. And the way that we, place ourselves in our immediate lives and within the broader cosmos is all about the way that we construct and tend to our personal paradigm. So I'm looking forward to talking about paradigm shifts, whether they be small or large within our own lives, and that'll be fun to explore. So that's on the personal level, but let's also reflect some of the things that we want to talk about on the broader technological level. And I know, Josh, you're my resource for all that stuff. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about Dear Moon and SpaceX and Blue Origin, these other things?
Yeah. One thing that is currently changing the paradigm on this planet is landing rockets. You may have seen it on the news, Brian.
It's really amazing.
Landing rockets. I can't express enough how impressive this feat actually is. SpaceX and Blue Origin, and I'm sure a couple other companies are working on it, but SpaceX and Blue Origin for sure are doing it. Launching rockets out into outer space and then landing them on their tail. I don't know if you've ever tried to balance a ruler on your finger. If you take a
almost
ruler...
every day.
Almost every day, really. This is how I can kind of help elaborate on how impressive this feat actually is. But to balance something on its base like that as it's roaring through space with atmospheric wind conditions, etc., not only to do it onto a moving floating board out into the ocean, this is something that is completely revolutionizing our perspective on space travel and the capability of lower cost of entry to travel into outer space, rocket reusability, making traveling to the moon and to Mars common play. This is happening on this planet right now. This paradigm of, space being really expensive and only the realm of governments to play in, to space being not that expensive to travel to, much like plane tickets are not that expensive to get currently, and the space industry becoming private and or public and commercial, and all of the mining and heavy industry are on the planet that's currently destroying the planet, moving that stuff to, say, the moon or to Mars, where there's resources that we could also mine at the same time, and then Earth being designated a residential area. This is all kind of the paradigm here in the near future that the simple act of landing rockets is all alluding to and leading us towards, which is incredibly exciting. And this indeed is also a part of the new energy industry. So too is the future of electric cars and electric transport. With that is autopilot, and the cars actually being able to drive themselves around city streets, come and pick you up, drive you home, charge themselves, all on autopilot with their own forms of safe artificial intelligence, and going from there into an elaborate tunnel system to decrease the amount of actual congestion on any given roadway. The future is coming. The future is coming rapidly, as Brian said earlier. The future is coming, and it's coming quick, and it's incredibly exciting. I can't express that enough. These are all exciting topics that we're going to be talking about as the months and years come into the future of the new energy industry. And then some more topics, we'll just keep rolling around here, is, we talked a little bit about paradigm shifts, but I would also like to talk about consciousness and science of consciousness in general, and quantum physics and the quantum world. I was actually watching Science Channel the other day, and they were telling the story about Einstein and Bohr, and Einstein's kind of greatest accident, if you will, where Einstein wrote this paper where he did not like quantum mechanics. He said quantum mechanics pretty much says magic is possible, talking about entanglement and how particles can be entangled over vast distances in space and react instantaneously without any transmission of a signal, time delay. Instantaneous entanglement is magic in Einstein's eyes. Wrote this big long paper to Bohr, another physicist, who said this is not possible and here's why. And Bohr said, well, it's possible that quantum physics and quantum mechanics is indeed still possible, and entanglement could be a real thing. And Einstein was like, what am I to do with this? And it's fascinating because, as technology evolved, decades later, able to do experiments where you shine a laser beam off some calcium to create some photons that are maybe entangled. And then when they measure those photons, they have a higher than average statistical connectedness, if you will, in their measurements, proving that they are indeed entangled at a distance. And so far, it's been nothing but confirmed. And that was, Einstein's greatest accident.
Right. And was it Einstein who called it spooky action at a distance?
Spooky action at a distance. Yeah, that was actually an excerpt from that paper that I'm referencing.
Great. So we'll explore more of quantum physics and its weirdness.
And how consciousness is involved in it all.
Right. Quantum physics seems to suggest that the observer has a role in the reality of a given observed phenomenon. So there's a lot of discussion around that, and I think as physics continues to develop, and as thinking, as the personal paradigms of physicists continue to change, I'm really curious to see what the next few decades are going to show us in terms of the way that physicists are thinking about quantum physics and its intersection with consciousness.
Yeah, it's incredibly exciting. I mean, even just our current computer technological developments, a lot of that is hinged upon, entanglement and quantum physics being a fact of the world, because, a lot of this is done, all this memory stuff is done on the quantum level, if you will, and so it hinges upon that technology, and going forward, shifting, creating new discoveries of understanding the universe, implementing them into technological developments. I don't know if I can express the gravity of this situation enough. Not to be a play on words there, but gravity also being a focal point of this scientific revolution and evolution in scientific understanding of the universe. Gravity. Currently, gravity isn't really understood. We understand what happens to objects in a gravitational field. They fall. And then Einstein was like, oh, the field is actually curved and it's blah, blah, blah. But exactly what is gravity? How do we produce it? How do we harness it? How do we take this understanding of creating and producing and harnessing gravity to a next generation of galactic space exploration beyond anything with which rocketry is capable of? That, I don't think I express the gravity of the situation.
Yeah, really. Talk about paradigm shift. I mean, we're talking about landing rockets, right? And the shift that's coming with that, and with AI, and with self-driving cars and automation and all of that. That's all stuff that we can kind of get our heads around. But when you start talking about harnessing gravity in new ways, I think you're right. The gravity of the situation, at least it doesn't land with me. But I am curious about it. And like I said at the beginning, I'm here to be curious. I'm here to seek new answers and new questions about what is possible for humanity. And I'm really looking forward to learning more about what Nassim Haramein has to say about unified physics and gravity and all this stuff. And this kind of brings us to another topic that is really important. And for me, as a little bit of an outsider in all this stuff, a curious outsider, I'm really interested in understanding how do we move forward with new ideas in science, new ideas in the way that we live in the age of, I hate to say it, fake news.
Fake news.
In the age of, all these competing narratives, how do we find the narrative that is scientifically viable?
Or crazy mad scientists who unknowingly are like preaching a bunch of garbage, if you will.
Right, yeah.
I personally have fallen victim to this from time to time, but that's all a part of the development,
It is. It's part of it. It's part of it. Because I think you and I are eager to learn as much as we can about all this. And I think both of us intuitively feel the truth of
we want to believe.
Exactly. We want to believe. And when we are in that mode, I mean, it brings so much enthusiasm and appreciation for whatever we're studying. And also,
it's so exciting. It has to be true.
Exactly. So I think intuitively we know big things are coming. And
big things are coming.
And we really want to be at the cutting edge and to know as much as we can. And so I'm interested to, along with you, discover how we can do that responsibly for ourselves and for the audience.
Yeah. I mean, fake news or just like following people who may not be saying correct information is a real thing that happens. And an example of that, I'm just going to tell a quick story. You may have heard of the scientist Miran Kesh. I came across him years and years ago, 2010 or something, 9 years ago. Started following him, was really fascinated about what he was saying, and it loosely kind of related to a lot of other stuff I was researching. So I was following him, promoting his work, and over time started to see, some cracks in the foundation, if you will. For example, he was promoting this GANS material, gas in a nanosolid state. I made a video about it, but I bought this device that he was selling. I made some of the material that he said was, revolutionary. CO2 in a solid state at normal atmospheric room pressure and temperature. Impressive. Magical even. So I bought his device, made some of this material, shipped it to a laboratory and had it atomically tested. Spent over $1,000 in this process, and sure enough, it was no more impressive than sunscreen, just some zinc compounds that were congealed into a solid. That then I dehydrated and shipped to a lab and spent $1,000 on testing. Anyway, I emailed him about this and got a rather incoherent response back. But this is just one example. You got to have a grain of salt with the real kind of next level technological breakthroughs and the real leaps. Like when we're talking about gravity drive and harnessing gravity and using gravity waves, NASA is talking about that, and the mainstream kind of physics community is talking about that. But there's also fringe, people in talking about that as well. And what is true? Where do the lines? How do we know? And it's a process of kind of following your gut, following your heart, but also following the mathematics, and then following the spreadsheet that analyzes results, and and double checking things and believing in science as well as faith, if you will.
Yeah. I really appreciate you sharing that story, and I love that you went through the process of testing it and everything. I mean, you just shared.
I had to. I was talking about it for a few years at this point. I wanted it to be so true. I was once on a national television talking. I was just a webcast online, but I was like live Skyping in, and I was telling a story about this GANS material that was so true at the time, and I laughed, and a bunch of boogers flew out of my nose. That's when I knew that I was talking about a bunch of boogers.
That's when you knew.
And at that point, I was like, all right, I'm shipping it to a lab, I'm testing it, and I'm debunking it because boogers are on my face.
Well, you heard it here, folks.
Just kidding.
Boogers in your face
Just kidding.
Is a great indicator of some silly stuff going on.
Welcome to the new energy industry.
Well, that's awesome. I really appreciate that, together we can be in the state of I want to believe, and also be in the state of I'm going to take it with a grain of salt, and I'm going to do my due diligence as best as I can. I'm not a scientist. I'm a researcher in the field of yoga. I'm sort of a scientist in certain ways, but I'm not a trained chemist or physicist. But we have so many experts and resources available to us. We, as the hosts on this podcast, speaking to you now, our audience, we're going to do our best to bring cited resources to you and do our due diligence so that you can at least take what we're doing and then go the next step further in your own research. We'll try to leave you the breadcrumbs of where we developed what we're sharing with you.
So now wrapping up this podcast, again, if you would like to support, if you'd enjoyed this podcast, if you'd like to see more and more of these come into the future, visit our website, thenewenergyindustry.com, and become a founder by ordering your Nikola Tesla Challenge coin. We cannot do this without your support. We really appreciate it.
And I just want to say that I have my own Nikola Tesla Founders coin that I got back in the day when Josh first started this. And when you designed this coin yourself, and you went through prototypes, and you developed it like a sculptor. You worked with the coin minting, people who actually manufactured it, but you designed this thing, and mine is sitting right here on my little altar, and Nikola Tesla's sitting here alongside of my spiritual heroes and guides. So he really is someone who I see as a leader for us, someone who was way before his time and underappreciated. And I'm just glad that he's coming back into the world now as someone who people are knowing more about, and people like Elon Musk are taking up his name to bring prestige to it,
Tesla.
and to take it to the next level. I also want to say that the coins make a really nice gift. I've given 2 as gifts to people who, if you have a friend who is a little fringy and curious like yourself, maybe curious about what's next for humanity, this is a nice gift for them to kind of bring them into a feeling of community and inclusion with other people who are like-minded and other people who are looking for what's next and asking big questions like we are here on the podcast. So keep it in mind for yourself and for your loved ones. They make great gifts. I can speak from experience.
It took me about 6 months to sculpt it, working with a coin manufacturing company. So it's like a heart-centered artistic piece that I created as well. And if you'd like to see more of my work, you can follow me. My name is Josh Vodisek. You can follow me on Instagram at Josh Vodisek.
And if you want to follow me, you can find me on Instagram. I'm at BG_the_technoyogi. That's Technoyogi, which is my company, TKNO Yogi. And please, if you're interested in sponsoring us or being featured on future podcasts, please let us know. You can reach us at info@thenewenergyindustry.com.
We're going to steal the slogan from Blue Origin. Got it? How do you say it?
Because they're always stealing stuff from Tesla?
No, not Tesla. Blue Origin's always poaching employees from SpaceX, so the story goes. So we're going to steal Blue Origin's mantra, which is Gratitium ferocier.
Almost.
You give it a go.
I think it's Gradatim ferociter.
Gradatim ferociter. It means step by step, ferociously. It's Latin. Anyway, we would like to embody that same model that Blue Origin is pushing forward into the space frontier here with the new energy industry. And with that being said, I would like to take this moment to reach out through the space and the time that separates us to offer a sincere hand in friendship and to say thank you for joining us on this exciting journey.
Thank you, friends.
Thanks, and we'll see you in the future. Beep, beep, boop, pop, pop, pop.
Beep, 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 beep.
Brought to you by the new energy industry.